Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today we have an analysis about the 2017 general election, Senate election in the state of Alabama. And I originally had another video about this where I analyzed the primaries, the runoff, and then I made a prediction for the general election. Um, my primary prediction was a bit off, so I didn't talk much about Doug Jones. I didn't give him much of a possibility of winning the general election, but now things has definitely changed from when I uploaded that video. I've been getting a lot of comments to redo this one and to analyze everything since Roy Moore, all the allegations against him, things like that. So we're going to go over first off with the 2016 general election results between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and the Senate election in 2016. So if we look where Donald Trump got, he got 62.1% of the vote to Hillary Clinton's 34.4%, and that's a considerable margin for a Republican. This is a Republican stronghold state. It's always called at poll closing time. I don't think there's ever been a period in history where it was considered too close to call. In modern day history, going from Gore up, maybe with Obama it was considered too early to call at one point, but then it ultimately went to a Republican. And I haven't seen a Democrat win here in a very long time. And considering the fact that Donald Trump won by such a large margin and the fact that the Senate, Richard Shelby, a former Democrat who switched over during the Republican Revolution, he got 64.1% of the vote. That's more than Trump won the state. And overall, this is not looking good for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party does not really have a shot at winning the Senate seat here. I understand the argument that Doug Jones is doing somewhat good in polling with the allegations against Roy Moore, but these are hardcore conservative voters. A lot of them said that a lot of them have been talking about how they're going to disregard the allegations. He's denied them. They don't necessarily believe them. Some Republicans do believe them. They're going to write in a candidate, but ultimately it will come down to a Republican winning this state. The stakes are extremely high here for the Republican Party. That's why Donald Trump and the RNC are now backing Roy Moore after previously unendorsing him. The stakes are extremely high here. If they lose this seat, they only have to lose 2 to lose their majority in 2018. And it's going to look really bad for the Republican Party to lose in a state like Alabama. When a Democrat hasn't won here, actually the current senator from the state of Alabama, Richard Shelby, was the last Democrat to win in the state. And frankly, if the Republican Party lost here, it would be very embarrassing. Um, we're going to analyze the election results from 2014, where Jeff Sessions last ran, and he got 97.3% of the vote uncontested. So that's surely expected. But then we look at the 2008 Senate special election, even with an African American candidate on the Barack Obama year of 2008. Jeff Sessions got 63.36% of the vote. I understand he was extremely popular, everything like that, but Roy Moore is going to pull off this election. That's going to be a harsh reality for a lot of Democrats. Doug Jones is in the state like Alabama. This was a state like Arizona, Texas, Florida. They could have a chance of flipping it. But this is a state like Alabama, the center for all white jokes you hear from people. And honestly, that's not necessarily a good thing for the Democratic Party. They will need extensive turnout in order to win and suppress Republican turnout. And that's not going to happen. The Secretary of State expects 20% turnout, and that's enough to get the Republicans to win by a 60 to 40 margin. And I understand that they may be losing a lot of these votes, but they're not going to the Democratic Party. They're going to a write-in candidate, which means that Roy Moore will still have a higher chance of winning regardless. It's not a clear majority winner, it's a plurality, meaning he could get 48.2% of the vote, Doug Jones could get 36%, and the write-in candidate could get more. And overall, the fact that Roy Moore won against an incumbent senator, sitting senator appointed by the governor, means that he's a very strong candidate. Now with all these things coming around, the polls have certainly tightened, but they're not necessarily an accurate indication. We have 2 outliers here. We have one from the Washington Post, which is more believable, Jones +3, but this Fox News poll does not add up. I think this Fox News poll was taken way too liberal. I think they've gotten more Democrats than Republicans. Jones being ahead by 10 does not match up with any previous data that we've gotten whatsoever. Even at his peak, when he was ahead of Roy Moore for that small period of time, he peaked at +8, not +10, and Roy Moore still had 2.5 average. And then we're going to look at the accuracy of polling during the runoff. The RCB average had Moore ahead by 11, pretty much. Moore only won by 9.2, not that much of a difference within the margin of error. I expect the same thing to happen here, except I think it would be more, maybe a 5% to 7% victory for Roy Moore. A 10% victory is a little tough for me to call. That would only be with a write-in candidate 10% over Jones, because I don't think a lot of these Republicans are going to Doug Jones. They are going to a write-in candidate like Luther Strange or another conservative, um, and it's not looking good for the Democratic Party regardless. I mean, if you look at President Trump's approval rating, his approval rating is pretty high in Alabama, but on a national level, this is the argument they've been making. His approval rating will definitely impact races, but not in a state like Alabama. We have the latest polling. I'm using it on Wikipedia because it shows it more, a lot more. But we have more Democratic wins on certain states. However, more Democratic polling where Doug Jones is ahead. However, it doesn't really mean much. A lot of these people could be lying to the pollsters as they did in 2016. People could be afraid to say they're voting for Roy Moore because of all these allegations. Imagine if you had Democratic neighbors, you're a Republican, and then a pollster calls you, and then you're going to say, hey, I'm undecided, or hey, I'm voting for Doug Jones. But you're really not. You're just embarrassed that you don't want to say you're voting for Roy Moore, and this is a factor that a lot of people are missing. They missed it in 2016, they're going to miss it again. Roy Moore is going to win the Senate race, but it's a matter of how much. Doug Jones has little to no chance of winning because this is a state like Alabama. And although there's always that argument, Trump's approval rating is down, things like that, this is Alabama. I keep reiterating this point because it's such a strong point that it needs to be reiterated this many times. It is Alabama. It is the center for all the white jokes. It's the center for all the people that want to say that they're a Republican. It's one of the most conservative states in the union. They have 6 representatives that are Republicans to 1 Democrat. I mean, it's just like the state of Maryland, but on the Republican side, and I use that because I'm from the state of Maryland, and it's just a way for me to connect the two. But it's the fact that this state is extremely conservative. Roy Moore definitely is going to win, and I think he's going to win by 5 to 10%. I don't know the exact margin, but these polls are definitely people lying to the pollsters. People are afraid of saying they're voting for Roy Moore because of these allegations, and it would make them look bad. Here, it's a little bit trickier. I understand that maybe they could have been voting for the Democrat at this point, but Trump has gotten back, and Roy Moore's poll numbers have gone up. This Fox News poll is pretty much the only outlier I've seen in this entire chart, but the Republican is going to win. If the polls show the Republican ahead, I don't see anyone lying saying that they're going to vote for Roy Moore. I don't see anyone saying, oh, I'm going to go vote for Roy Moore because they're afraid of other people. No one, I don't think that's not what's going to happen. I'm serious. If you look at the way that Alabama is made, if you say you're going to vote for conservative, it's like, okay. But if you say you're voting for a Democrat, I understand the alienation factor. But this is a special election. It's not going to help if you're going to lie to a pollster saying you're voting for Roy Moore. There's nothing really wrong with Doug Jones. Just like a lot of the mainstream media says, they don't cover a house that's not on fire. Essentially, the Doug Jones campaign. It would be more embarrassing on a national level to say you're voting for Roy Moore rather than Doug Jones, which is why a lot of the women in Alabama refuse to talk to the mainstream media, but rather would tell them privately that they are voting for Roy Moore still. And the same thing happened with pollsters. The same thing happened in 2016 with Donald Trump. People said to the Trump pollsters that they were voting for Hillary Clinton, but they were actually voting for Donald Trump, which is why we saw a drastic change in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, states that wouldn't even flip for George W. Bush, and they flipped for Trump. And that was a shock to people even like me. I thought it would come down to maybe 278 electoral votes for Hillary Clinton to 260 for Trump, but it came down to a Trump victory, 306 to 232. And then we're going to look at the polling again just to cover it. The only time where Jones actually took ahead was in this point in time when he was ahead by 5 and 8, so he averaged about 0.8 ahead of Roy Moore. But then Roy Moore got back up in polling, probably because Trump endorsed him, and the fact that he's been making robocalls, that's definitely helping Roy Moore in this state, considering it's pretty much a solid Trump state, and will be in 2020. And then we look at the results again for the 2016 Senate election. The only Democratic stronghold is pretty much one strip across Alabama, and that wasn't even enough to get the Democrat over 36% in the U.S. Senate. And Doug Jones, I understand he will outperform Ron Crompton from 2016, but he's not going to win. They cannot drive turnout that high to overcome Republican votes at this point. And it's so late in the game that tomorrow we're going to see a new senator. Now, the voting on the expulsion of Roy Moore, that's going to come up pretty soon, probably. If not, then it's just going to go on as another senator from Alabama. But overall, the Democratic Party, if they put funds into this race like they are now, it's not going to help. pretty much do not have a chance at winning in this state. And the arguments are that, oh, he's a child molester, things like that. But they're still conservatives. They are hardcore Trump voters. They are hardcore conservatives. That's like taking a Democrat in a state like Massachusetts and then giving him scandals like Hillary Clinton and expecting them to vote for someone like Donald Trump. It's a complete drastic change, and they're not going to vote for a liberal Democrat. The most they'll do is not vote or write in a candidate, and it's not going to make that much of an effect. So we're going to look at the Senate election from 2008 again, and then we're going to go past that to 2002. But again, even with an African-American candidate in Barack Obama's year, they still lost with they barely got 36% of the vote, 37 if you round, and then going down to 2002, they did even better. The Democrats did even better, but the fact that they didn't do well in 2008 in an Obama year with an African-American candidate, what more can drive out African-American turnout? And African-American women running against Jeff Sessions, what more could drive African-American turnout? There's nothing left. Them bringing out mainstream candidates like Cory Booker, it's not going to help that much. The amount of African Americans to vote for the Democratic Party is not going to overcome the amount of Republicans that are still in the state of Alabama. And overall, Roy Moore is going to win in 2017 tomorrow, actually. I can't believe this election is coming so close, but overall, Roy Moore is going to win. He beat an incumbent senator in the primary. He's going to win again. And let's look at the county map for the runoff and the first round. So the first round, Mo Brooks took a little bit away from Roy Moore, but then Roy Moore solidified his ground. Luther Strange, pretty much, he carried a couple counties, but Roy Moore definitely did better on the second runoff between Strange and him. And overall, if Roy Moore is able to beat an incumbent senator in a Republican primary, he's going to beat the Democratic nominee in the general election. And so yeah, this is my final prediction between the two. I believe that Roy Moore will beat Doug Jones between 5 to 10%. I don't see any pathway for Doug Jones to win tomorrow. If I get proved wrong, well then so be it. I'm going to cover it probably tomorrow night. I'll probably live stream the general election with CNN coverage. I think they'll only pretty much cover the news at this point, so I'll probably talk for most of it until they actually make a projection and they come up with the results. But considering it's only one special election, I don't think they'll cut off their entire mainstream broadcasting just to do that. So tomorrow I'm going to come out with a Santa versus Trump election night, if not today. But yeah, so check that out for tomorrow. I'm considering either using a Santa type Christmas theme that I'm going to make myself, or I'll just use the CNN theme to make it more realistic, just so I can like mock a election night with CNN's projections. So thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you all tomorrow.